Here's how you do the Alliance Poison quest solo without dying. First, I'll cover how to best prepare for this quest, then I'll run through each part of the quest itself, and then I'll double back and talk about some of the more technical details for those who are crazy enough to try the quest earlier than they should, or for those who are interested in hearing about the niche game mechanics associated with this quest. One last note though, in order to show that this quest can be completed regardless of your gear, throughout all my testing, I didn't wear a single item with stats on it, and the only weapon I had equipped was the worn dagger I got at character creation. So, let's talk about preparation. First, you're going to need a lockpicking skill of at least 75, but since we'll be picking a lock under the pressure of a time constraint, I recommend going a bit higher just to be safe, since you don't want to waste time on a failed attempt. I tend to go all the way to 90, since that's how high I take it when I first do the lockpicking quest, but 80 or 85 should probably be fine. Second, even though you can initially pick up the quest at 20, you should really wait until level 22, or higher if you're not particularly confident, because that's when you get Vanish. And those 2 extra levels will also help out by decreasing the chance for your pickpocket or sap to resist, since the mobs we need to use these spells on are level 23. As for the last 2 things, these are a bit more optional, but I would still recommend considering them, and the first is making sure that you bring literally any dagger, because all of the patrollers and sentries in the tower are programmed to instantly die whenever you use ambush on them. Now you don't actually need to kill any of them to complete the quest, but having an instant way to clear some of them can definitely come in handy in certain situations. And last but not least, the other optional recommendation is that you may want to put a few points into the Master of Deception talent, as this will increase the effectiveness of your stealth up to a maximum of 3 character levels. It's not super necessary if you're confident in your positioning, but I just wanted to point out that this is a great option if you think you need it and if you can afford the respec. Alright, now let's get into the strategy. The first thing we need to do is pickpocket a key from the malformed Fias drone who patrols around the outside of the tower. But you'll probably notice that there are some additional drones patrolling the same area in packs of 2. I tend to just mark these extra patrols with target icons and keep an eye on them, but you can definitely kill them just to be safe if you're capable of doing so. But all you need to do here is wait for the malformed drone to be alone, carefully position yourself directly behind him, sneak up, and then pick his pockets. But if for whatever reason he catches you, or the pickpocket resists, immediately use Vanish, wait for the cooldown to finish, and then try again. You can technically try to pop evasion and sprint, but just note that this guy hits pretty hard, so at that point, you're really just playing with fire. Also, if you're having trouble catching up to him when you're trying to pickpocket him, or if he seems to be in a good spot, but you're not quite sure if he's at the point in his pathing where he might turn around, just make sure to use Distract as you approach, and you should be fine. One last note about this NPC though, if you attempt to pickpocket him and get an error message telling you that the target has already had its pockets picked, that means that another rogue has already stolen the key. And if that's the case, you can try and convince some randoms to help you kill him and reset him, but it's much easier and safer to just wait about 10 minutes or so for the pickpocket table to reset, and then you should be able to pickpocket him without any issues. Once you have the key, then you need to make your way into the tower. When you enter, you'll see that there are 2 different ramps that both connect to a windy path upwards, and in this portion of the tower, there are 2 patrollers you'll need to keep an eye out for, but only one of them will ever proceed downwards towards the entrance. Now the left ramp generally seems to be the safer of the 2, but just in case, the best thing to do is to locate that first patroller right away to see which path they take, and then you can figure out which way is the best route upwards. But if you have a dagger and want to be really safe, you can always just wait for them to reach the bottom, and then one-shot them with ambush to prevent them from running into you later. One thing to note though, and this goes for any moment where you may want to one-shot something, there is still a chance for ambush to miss, so if you're adamant about killing the mobs, just be aware of that. It's also quite possible that whenever you enter, you may see the patrollers up here engaging in some RP. If that's the case, your best bet is to take the left ramp upwards, wait here for them to finish, and once they're done, the one closer to you should turn around and head down the ramp you didn't take. But again, just keep a close eye on them in case they don't do that for whatever reason. But anyways, once the second patroller turns and walks upward, then you can either ambush them and take either of the 2 paths upward, or you can just ignore them and walk up the path they didn't take, which is usually the one to the right. And then once you get here, just wait for them to walk back down before you progress further. But as you continue, you're going to want to make sure to keep an eye out for this set of 2 patrollers on the next floor. Now you do have the option to kill these mobs as well, but you'll only be able to one-shot one of them since the other one will immediately aggro after the first one dies. Now you can technically ambush one, and then use Vanish to ambush the other, but I don't really think killing them is all that necessary, and I think the best thing to do is just wait for them to pass the stairs, and then follow them from a safe distance until you reach the final staircase up to Clavin's room. Once you're here, first, make sure your Vanish is available, then approach from behind, using Distract if you need it, and then spam your sap keybind. And the reason we do this is because even if he notices you, as long as you're spamming it, he should get stunned before he starts attacking you, since sap does not require you to be behind the target. But as soon as the stun happens, run straight to the chest, pick the lock, and as soon as you loot the journal, use your Hearthstone and turn your camera towards Clavin. If you manage to get the hearth before the sap breaks, then you're done. But if the sap breaks early, which it probably will, immediately use Vanish to reset him, stealth out of his aggro range, I like to use this corner off to the side, and then try the Hearth again. Now if for whatever reason your Hearth is down, you can technically escape without Hearthing by stealthing back down, but you'll want to be extra careful if you left any of the mobs alive. And this is because the Touch of Zanzil debuff that you get from opening the chest does actually reduce your stealth level by 50 points, or essentially 10 character levels. Now despite how crazy that sounds, you can definitely still escape undetected, but you'll need to pay extra attention to where all the patrols are and whichever direction they're facing. You could also just bring an anti-venom and cure the effect right away since it's just a regular poison, but honestly, you should probably just make sure your Hearth is up before attempting this, as that'll make the whole thing much easier. But that's how you do the Alliance Poison quest without dying. So now let's talk about some of the more technical stuff. I mentioned near the start that you can technically do this quest early, but that you should still probably wait until 22 for Vanish. But since it is possible, I'm sure you're wondering how to actually do that. And the short answer is that you basically do almost the exact same thing I just described, but you're much more reliant on having perfect luck since you don't have the incredible safety net of Vanish. But just for fun, let's imagine you do attempt this quest at 20. What might that look like? We can pretty much deal with any of the stealth detection problems by putting 5 points into Master of Deception, since that would make our effective stealth level match that of a level 23, which is the same level as Clavin and the Malformed Drone, but that doesn't change the fact that the resist chance for Pickpocket and Sap are still tied to player level. So, if you try this at level 20, you're much more likely to find yourself in a situation where you would need to Vanish, but since you're level 20, you don't really have the option to do so. Now sure, you can still escape from the drone with evasion and sprint if you have good timing and movement, but that still leaves us with Clavin to deal with. You can definitely still try to Hearth out during the sap, but remember how the sap can just randomly break early? Well, this happens because of something called Heartbeat, and if you're not familiar with this mechanic, any prolonged effect, like Sap in this instance, that has the Heartbeat resist flag attached to it, will actually do periodic resistance checks throughout the duration of the effect, rather than doing one single check when the ability is first used. How often these checks occur is a bit unclear, but for our context, this means that not only does a level 20 have a higher chance for their sap to resist right off the bat, but even if you land the sap, it also has a higher chance to break early. So, with how often Clavin tends to break out early even when you're level 22, the chance of getting the initial Hearth is pretty low. And since you don't have Vanish, that means you're going to have to run out with Clavin still attacking you instead. And if you didn't kill the sentries and patrollers, good luck with that. No, I'm not saying it's impossible, and I did actually manage to pull this off once during my testing, but it's definitely not something I could do reliably, because even if you manage to make it to the lower floors before the mobs attacking you can get there, they can still attack you, because as long as you're within their horizontal attack range, mobs can still hit you even when there are multiple floors in the way, and this interaction is because of a mechanic called bad game design. But if you're still set on trying this at level 20, even after everything I've told you, here's what I would do to minimize that risk as much as possible. Though I assure you, there will still be plenty of risk involved. First, I'd make sure to come with the best gear that I can find, and then clear the patrols outside before pickpocketing the Malformed Drone for the key, taking special care to make sure that I always have a clear shot to sprint away if I get caught. Then I'd use ambush to take down the 2 patrollers inside the tower, and as for the sentries, I'd probably just ambush one of them, and if I can't kill the other normally, I'd probably try to run all the way out to reset it, just hoping that I don't die in the process, and then go back in to ambush it. And once I clear all of those, I finally go to the top of the tower, sap Clavin, grab the book, and immediately pop an anti-venom, since Touch of Zanzil also reduces your agility, and agility gives us extra dodge chance. And since I just want to get away and reset him as fast as I can, I probably wouldn't try to Hearth, and instead I'd just jump down the tower a few floors at a time, and sprint away as soon as I got to the bottom. But just to reiterate, unless you're a thrill seeker, or just a crazy speedrunner who's calculated that this risk is worth the small amount of time you'd save by getting poisons a little bit early, if you have any actual attachment to your hardcore character, you should really just wait until level 22 when you get Vanish. But that's pretty much all I have for you. Like with most of my videos, this one turned out to be a bit longer than I initially anticipated, but hopefully it was helpful in some capacity. But if you have any tips or tricks that might make this quest a bit easier than I may have missed, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. And as always, thank you.